Pasadena, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It's like a donut, all around the outskirts, north, south, east, west. Some of the most affluent cities, San Marino, Sierra Madre, very beautiful place. But then in the center of the city, that's when it gets a little hood. That's what I remember, That's when, Villa Park and, you had the Latinos, Mexicans, and you had the brothers and, Pasadena my family moved there from the South. We have a huge family, parts of Georgia, parts of Tennessee, Chattanooga, and my great-grandmother was there in the late 60s, early 70s. So, we all migrated there, and just growing up there, going to school there, elementary, middle school, and high school, it made me who I am. I had to adjust coming from the South, but I think Altadena, Pasadena was the perfect place, to get that mentoring. I learned a lot about myself during those formative years, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. I went to Audubon. That was the first school I went to up on Altadena Drive in Lincoln for the 3rd grade, and then I went to Washington, the one on the hill, Marengo in Howard, I think. And then I finally finished elementary, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. I was at Field Elementary, East Side, in the good neighborhood, bust over there, And then I went to Wilson, junior high. I guess now it would be a middle school, but Wilson was awesome. I loved Wilson. All the people Brent Paysinger and Reggie King and Roma Durrell. I remember all, Wilson was awesome. And then from there, I went to Pasadena High School. After high school, and damn near immediately after high school, it's crazy. I got into the music industry. I was rapping, and during that time, I graduated in '89, so into the '80s, beginning of the '90s, and within the next, from the time I was 18 to 21, I was rapping. When I was a senior in high school, I put out my first record. Me and a friend of mine, he went to John Muir, but we put out a record, and we were really serious about it, and my people were disappointed because I wanted to rap more than I wanted to play basketball. And, I was fairly talented at basketball, but my passion at the time was with, rapping. It was challenging me more than basketball was. And so I got into the music industry, and a few years later, I became an A&R person for Loud RCA Records. And Loud Records at the time, we had the Wu-Tang, we had the Alcoholics, we had just signed Exhibit when I got there, we had Mobb Deep. It was a great time, and then from there I moved on and became Senior Vice President of A&R for Maverick Records, which is Madonna. So I was in the music industry for quite a bit, and I had a great time. And then I started meeting all of these people. One of the people I met was Kool Moe Dee, and that was in '97. And Kool Moe and I share a lot of different beliefs and concepts, and we started doing relationship roundtables all over the country. We did one in New York, we did a few in LA, a couple places in between, and we were drawing all of these people. And then it was Moe Dee who was like, hey man, you gotta write a book. You got too much information, you got too much knowledge, and it's contextual information. It's not trivia, bits and pieces that are not related, it's contextual. And he was like, if you write a book harnessing that ability to, articulate all of this information in a cohesive kind of way, that book could be very powerful. So I wrote a book, and it came out in 2005, and Mo was like, this book is horrible. Because he wanted a story, or he wanted something people could grasp a little easier. The book I wrote, I mean, was a book of poetry. It had poems and you know, it's like poems, then I explained the poems. There's 3 sections. I would explain the poems through prose, and then I had a glossary. Very heavy book. It was a philosophical book. It was about my life. So it's like if you wanted to get to know me, you could read that book and have a pretty strong grasp of who I am. But Mo was like, man, he was like, you're so high, you're no earthly good. You're gonna be broke. This book is not gonna sell anything. And I was like, come on, Mo, this is what came out, you know? And he was like, ah, man, that book is terrible. But what the book ultimately did was, it led me to getting on this television show called Black Men Revealed on TV One. And we got on that show, and a friend of mine who at the time was managing Jamie Foxx was like, Zoe, just go in and destroy these people. We got a religious dude, we just go in and destroy. So, needless to say, I was a standout on that show. And then they brought me back for season 2, and then the episode I did for season 2 became the season premiere. And then they also gave me my own radio show on Jamie Foxx's Sirius XM satellite. And I had the Voice of Reason, that was the name of the show. And that show was the #1 show on the Foxhole for 4.5 years. You know, Fox and I didn't hit it off too well in the beginning. But I think at the very least he respected the work that I did there, to the point where he came on the show a bunch of times, and you know, he was like, oh man, I totally misread you. You know, this show is powerful and it's helping people. So where I am today, I'm in radio still. I'm over at Dash Radio. That's where the Voice of Reason is now. It's a platform that has over 3 million listeners. And it's very powerful. And that book that Modi was asking about, I finally wrote it. You know, I finally wrote it. Crazy. But it's a relationship book. And the reason why I wrote this book, because I feel very strongly that basic things that happen in relationship are there as stepping stones to help us evolve and grow as individuals. And there's one thing about the Black community, and I'm part of it. We don't forgive. We don't forgive. We don't understand that I'm supposed to hurt you. There's no way you can learn unless you get hurt. There's no way you can forgive unless you've been hurt. So being hurt is part and parcel to the evolutionary concept of forgiveness. You cannot have forgiveness unless you've been wronged. So you have to walk into the situation understanding that contextually. But because we've been fed a myth about relationships, a fairy tale, this is going to work, everything's going to be all good, you know, sometimes we have to embrace the difficulties that come in our lives, because the only way to get the gift that the difficulty brings is to unwrap it. You can't unwrap it unless you embrace it. And most people don't want to embrace it, especially in this microwave community we live in now. The microwave culture we live in now says, oh, this doesn't feel good, I'm out. I'm on to the next situation. Well, you just rebooted the lesson you're supposed to learn in this situation. Right?
My mom, Becky, like, preach. Yeah.
Right? So I felt like...
Absolutely, yes.
I felt like the biggest thing we need in our community is a manual for relationships. And so I wrote the Relationship Dismount, How to Stick the Landing When Exiting a Toxic Relationship. Now, part of this book was in the making for many years. You know, just accumulating all of this information, empirical studies, peer-reviewed studies, you know, personal experiences of other people, coupled with my own. And when I wrote this book, it took me 6 weeks to write it. And it was 800 pages.
It just came out.
It just, I was, you know. But it took us another 4 years, almost 4 years to edit it, to get it down to 182 pages now. 12 chapters. At the end of every chapter, there are exercises and tests that one must partake before they can move on to the next chapter. It's a workbook, it's a wake-up book, it's a breakup book, and it's a makeup book. A lot of times people are afraid to read something that they think will end their relationship. If you're in a good relationship, this book will enhance it. If you read it with your partner, read it together, you know. I don't profess to be like an expert, so what I do is I create a loose template that you can add and adjust to fit you. And I always tell people, no one in this world is an expert on relationships.
Right. If they were.
In particular, an expert in yours. All we are to each other, lights. And lights guide. That's it. We point. Right? Nobody gets out at the stoplight and worships the stoplight for flashing red or yellow. Right? You can ignore the red light and run the light and get in an accident. But when you stop at the red light, you don't go, thank you, light, for protecting me. I've been in this entertainment thing for a long time. And the thing about planning, God is interesting. Because you can plan for something and you won't know if your plan is slightly off until that plan hits reality. And then I look at it like, oh, it hit reality and this is off, this is off, this is off, this. Thanks God for showing me that. And then I adjust. So to answer your question more succinctly, we're trying to, move into television, right? We have a morning show here at T Radio V. We just finished recording. We've been doing it here for about 2 years now. And it's been the #1 show here at tradiov.com every Monday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And this is a socially conscious show. So we bring on all types of people from all walks of life. And we have a 70-year-old Jewish psychiatrist as a co-host. We have a comedian as a co-host. And we try to tackle the toughest topics in the world because what I find is, especially in our community, we don't really talk. We just go about our business, but we don't talk about things that if we had these conversations openly, honestly, objectively, it could break up a lot of negative energy that keeps us in bondage, right? To me, misunderstanding is a type of bondage. To me, unforgiveness is a type of bondage. And if black people could come together and have these types of conversations, like this conversation we had today about abuse in the church, right? About how certain pastors try to govern and legislate the sexuality of their parishioners. And a lot of people have been hurt, but a lot of people are afraid to have this conversation. So we tend to push the envelope on the So What show. I have another show that I'm supposed to be going over to after this interview. It's called The Voice of Reason. It started on Jamie Foxx's Foxhole Network on Sirius XM, I think it's channel 96. It started over there. But now it's over here at Dash Radio. And from these different platforms, we're just trying to build up the name and the energy to get the TV show. Because the TV show is going to be the next evolution of what we're doing, right? And there's nothing like it. I mean, you take Real Time with Bill Maher, you take Iyanla Fix My Life, you take Dave Chappelle, and then you wrap all of that together, and then you have the show. It's funny, it's insightful, it's poignant, but it's inspirational. And we're recklessly funny, but we want to have the difficult conversation. I always say, if you can go to sleep after watching one of our shows, we didn't do our job. What are your standards? And they all got standards. Well, the standard is the relationship routine. You have that in place even without the man.
Right.
And then if he doesn't fit the routine, you'll discard the man in favor of the routine.
Right.
That's why the book says, never date your ideas. You have an idea of who he's supposed to be, and when he looks the part, you think he's compatible with you. But what you don't recognize is you're not really interfacing with him, you're interfacing with your ideas.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And men have been socialized
And they
to
know what
mimic
say. Exactly.
your ideas. That's why we ask you. If I sit a woman down and say, what speaks louder? Words or actions?
You ask me?
I'm asking.
Actions.
Most women say actions. Right? And then I say, okay, what speaks louder than actions? Where you at with that?
I would say thoughts. But the thoughts drive your actions.
Right. You there. You there. This is what I tell women. Intention speaks louder than behavior.
But you gotta get to, that's a layer you gotta get to.
But then
though.
women say, what do you mean intention? I said, a man's intention. I can intend to behave exactly the way you want me to. And that intention could be, because if I behave the way she wants me to, I'm going to have
Absolutely. They do
sex.
that all the, yes, that's it.
That's how we're socialized.
Exactly.
Men, shut up, listen to her ideas and concepts, then
And
mold
morph. Yes.
yourself, mold your behavior to fit her ideas about relationships.
Yes.
So what happens when you have expectations and ideas? Expectations always lead to disappointment. Because if you don't get exactly what you're expecting, you get beneath that, you're a little disappointed. If you get more than that, you're okay, that's just icing.
Yeah.
Right, great. But for the most part, you're expecting a behavioral confirmation for an idea.
Right.
And when you meet him 18 months, 2 years later, when you meet the real him,
Yeah, because they can do it a long
you go, well,
time.
who is this dude?
But they feed them. I picked that up. I mean, they actually, that's why I don't like when people ask, like, men, it's almost like I'm quiet now. I just want to see what you gonna do.
Exactly.
Don't ask me what. I don't have any expectations. I always say that. Well, what do you don't have any standards? No. I just want to see you. What you about?
But this book challenges men and women to really vet out the belief or the standard or the condition. If you do the research, most clinicians will tell you the highest functioning relationships have flexible beliefs. Not inflexible ones,
Right.
flexible ones.
Right.
Ones that are scalable. You know what? This worked for me when I was 17. Well, now that I'm 27, this no longer works. So let me overhaul this belief. This is what this book does.
That's two people that have done the preparation,
Right.
the internal preparation.
Right.
Meeting. Now that's a bomb meeting. Look at that.
If they've done that.
If
And
they've
even
done
if
it,
they've
absolutely.
done that, it doesn't guarantee that they're going to be on the same page.
But it's going to be an experience, regardless.
Exactly.
I mean, and hopefully a positive, but absolutely an experience.
Exactly. Well, relationships that have no purpose but feel good are the same as soul food. Right? I'm just doing this because I want to feel something else.
Right.
Well, the reason why you have the feeling in you and it's present and it's at the surface and it has your attention is because it needs to be resolved. That's why it's there. You know how many people have this quiet hurt just lingering right behind this perfected mask that they present to the public as, I'm all right, I've moved on. This book tackles that. You don't get to do that with your life.
You're not even living fully if you don't.
You're not alive.
Right, you're not.
You think you're alive, but watch, the next hurt is going to be compounded because you didn't face down this hurt.